Picture this. It's like 108 degrees in rural Oklahoma.
Oh, just brutal heat.
Yeah, exactly. And this 63-year-old master HVAC technician pulls into a gravel driveway. He's driving this restored 1964 GMC van with, like, a cartoon mascot painted on the side.
Right. Totally old school.
Completely. He looks like a total relic of the past, right? Like the kind of local handshake business you just expect to be wiped out by the next big app.
You'd think so, yeah.
But behind the scenes, this guy is quietly wielding automated artificial intelligence, remote satellite diagnostics, and this hyper-specific psychological hiring matrix to build an absolutely undisruptible service empire.
It is such an incredible contradiction, honestly. I mean, we are so conditioned to think that scaling a business means removing the human element entirely.
Right, like everything has to be automated.
Exactly. Build a SaaS platform, automate the checkout, make everything totally faceless. But what we're looking at today leans entirely into the human mess.
Which is exactly why we are diving into this for you today. We've got a wild stack of sources in front of us.
We really do.
We're looking at this psychological transcript focusing on the developmental environment of kids raised in the 1970s. And alongside that, we have a highly detailed satellite operator playbook from a rural Oklahoma HVAC business called Hartzell's Heat and Air.
Plus their internal HR manuals, which are fascinating.
Yeah, and a mountain of web data, including their YouTube analytics. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how Dave Hartzell, this master technician in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, cracked the code on dominating a local market.
And to do that, we actually have to start about 50 years ago.
We do. Because to understand how this HVAC empire is expanding, you really have to look at the specific psychological fingerprint of the people Dave is actively hunting for.
Right, and that fingerprint was forged in the cultural shifts of the 1970s.
The sources paint such a visceral picture of what it meant to be a kid back then. I mean, if you were growing up in that era, you were probably riding in the back of a station wagon with no seatbelts.
Definitely no seatbelts.
The windows are cracked because your parents are chain smoking and the eagles are just, bleeding through the AM radio.
It's a very specific vibe.
It is. And the sources point out it wasn't necessarily like malicious neglect. It was just a time when nobody was constantly hovering over you.
Which fundamentally alters how a child's brain develops problem-solving skills. I mean, the 1970s was the first decade where the American family began visibly fracturing in real time.
Right, the divorce rates.
Yeah, between the 60s and the 80s, the divorce rate doubled. That created profound instability.
And the psychological transcript we have cites this incredible 20-year study by a psychologist named E. Mavis Hetherington.
That study is huge.
Yeah, she followed over 450 families and identified this phenomenon called parentification. Essentially, kids were forced to take on the emotional or logistical responsibilities of adults simply because the adults in the room were, they were overwhelmed by the cultural crisis happening around them.
Right. Think about the mechanics of that for a 10-year-old. You are suddenly managing your younger siblings' meals, or, you're absorbing your mother's stress about making rent.
Which is heavy for a kid.
Incredibly heavy. And from a neurological standpoint, your prefrontal cortex actually adapts. It creates this incredibly functional, hyper-self-sufficient coping mechanism.
You just figure it out.
Exactly. You learn to manage crises without escalating them to an authority figure because the authority figure is already tapped out.
Okay, let's unpack this because the developmental psychologist Peter Gray is also heavily referenced here, specifically his research on unstructured kid-led play.
Yeah, the whole go outside and don't come back until dinner thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These kids left the house at dawn and there were no cell phones. If you got into an argument over a baseball game, you couldn't call a parent to mediate.
You had to negotiate the dispute yourself.
Right. Make up your own rules and figure out who to actually trust.
And that's exactly the point. According to Gray's research, that environment produces adults who are exceptionally comfortable managing ambiguity. They do not panic when a situation isn't immediately resolved.
Okay, let me connect the dots here. So it's like these latchkey kids were forged in a slow-motion cultural crisis learning to fix their own problems before the streetlights came on, and that accidentally made them the perfect psychological profile for fixing air conditioners in a 130-degree Oklahoma attic.
That is the genius of Dave Hartzell's hiring matrix. He isn't just looking for someone who knows how to braze a copper pipe. He is actively hunting for that generational formation.
Even if they weren't literally born in the 70s.
Right. Regardless of their actual birth year, they must possess that psychological fingerprint. Think about the physical reality of HVAC repair. You are alone in a sweltering attic. You're covered in fiberglass insulation.
Sounds awful.
It is. And the system is throwing some bizarre error code that isn't in the manual, and the homeowner is standing at the bottom of the ladder, incredibly anxious about the bill.
Right. If you are someone who needs an immediate answer or needs a boss to text you the exact solution, you're going to completely melt down.
Precisely. Hartzell wants a technician who can sit with that ambiguity, read the room without being told what to see, and just methodically work the problem.
And there's another fascinating layer to this 70s profile in the sources. It's this deep-seated institutional disillusionment. The polling data from that era is staggering.
Oh, the trust in government numbers.
Yeah. In 1964, 77% of Americans trusted the government to do the right thing most of the time. By 1980, that number had cratered to 25%.
A 52-point drop.
Massive. And kids absorbed that atmosphere. They developed what the transcript calls a calibrated skepticism.
Meaning they did not assume adults, corporations, or institutions inherently knew what they were doing.
Right, but the paradox, and this is what blew my mind, is that this skepticism actually bred a fiercely deep, non-performative loyalty.
Because they grew up in a world where things were falling apart. So when they actually found someone worthy of their trust, they locked in.
Yes. And in a local service business, that kind of quiet, authentic loyalty is your most valuable asset. It's not about putting on a customer service smile for a performance. It's about genuine accountability.
But this immediately brings up a massive operational problem.
How so?
Well, if you are hiring people who are fiercely independent, used to solving their own problems, and deeply skeptical of corporate authority, how on earth do you manage them?
Oh.
A traditional employer-employee relationship sounds like a nightmare for this demographic. You try to micromanage them, they'll just quit.
Which is exactly why Dave Hartzell had to build a radically different business structure. He recognized early on that to scale his brand without suffocating these people, he couldn't just hire wage workers.
He had to create business owners.
Exactly. He calls it the satellite operator model. And the playbook breaks this down into a highly specific three-party structure.
Let's walk through it. First, you have the truck investor. This is essentially a local capital partner who puts up somewhere between $32,000 and $59,000. That buys a fully wrapped, used truck, the necessary tools, and the initial inventory.
And what do they get for that?
In return, the investor gets 15% of the gross revenue every month until that initial investment is paid off. After that, they keep an 8% equity stake indefinitely.
Okay, so then you have the second party, which is the tech or the operating partner. This is the person carrying that 70s psychological profile we just talked about.
Right. They provide the labor, the mechanical problem solving, and crucially, the local community relationships.
And the compensation for this tech is wild to me. If the investor puts up all the money, the tech still takes home up to 50% of the net revenue.
It's a huge cut.
And if the tech has enough capital to self-fund their own truck and tools, they keep up to 60% of the net.
Yeah.
Plus, they keep 100% of the commissions on preventive maintenance agreements, which they call PMAs, and extended JB warranties.
And finally, the third party is Hartzell's Heat and Air itself. They take a flat 20% franchise fee.
And what does Dave provide for that 20%?
He provides the established brand reputation, his master HVAC license, which legally covers the entire state of Oklahoma, the centralized dispatch software, and all the back office infrastructure.
They even have a built-in scaling mechanism called tech-driven expansion, which is split into Path A and Path B.
Right, the cross-border expansion.
Yeah, an existing operator can recruit a sub-operator in a neighboring state, like Missouri or Kansas. Because in those specific states, you don't actually need a full state mechanical license. You only need an EPA 608 certification.
Let's clarify what that is for a second, because it's an important distinction. An EPA 608 isn't a business license.
Yeah, it's not.
No, it's a federal environmental certification that basically proves you know how to handle and recover chemical refrigerants without illegally venting them into the ozone layer.
Got it. So if a tech mentors a new recruit across the border, who just has that EPA 608. The recruiting tech earns a 5% fee on the new operator's gross revenue for the first year.
It's brilliant.
Wait a second, though. I have to push back on this model. Hartzell is basically giving away up to 80% of the revenue to the operator and investor.
That's right.
If I look at almost any other franchise model, fast food, retail, whatever, the corporate goal is to squeeze every possible dime out of the operator. Why is Dave leaving so much money on the table?
What's fascinating here is that it looks crazy on a spreadsheet until you realize the generous split is the entire marketing strategy.
Really?
By
Okay.
giving up that 80%, Hartzell completely bypasses traditional customer acquisition costs. Think about how expensive advertising is. Billboards, local TV spots, Google ads, they just drain capital.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you hire a technician who coaches the local Little League team, who goes to the community church, who volunteers at the fire department, just like Dave himself did for 5 years, that person generates service calls purely through analog local trust.
Oh, wow. It's actually written explicitly in the satellite playbook. It says, a known tech in a small town gets the phone call before the customer ever opens Google.
Exactly. By giving the tech up to 60% of the net, Hartzell buys absolute dedication. If he squeezed the tech for 40 or 50%, that highly capable, independent individual would just go learn the ropes and immediately leave to start their own independent shop.
That makes total sense. This model secures their loyalty and legally binds their reputation to the Hartzell brand.
Yep.
Okay, so hearing all of this, it's very easy to picture this business operating out of, like, a cigar box. Carbon copy receipts, a dusty ledger, totally old school.
Sure, a real mom and pop feel.
Right. But the web data and the HR manuals reveal the exact opposite. This deeply analog trust is backed by aggressive, cutting-edge technology and engineering.
The contrast is what makes the business so durable. Dave Hartzell is not just a guy who knows how to turn a wrench. If you dig into his background in the playbook, before he started this company, he managed a $30 million classified national infrastructure project for Sprint.
I saw that. He delivered it under budget with 0 FCC outages on a live network. That requires insane logistical precision.
And he took that exact same engineering rigor and applied it to residential HVAC in rural Oklahoma.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like finding a NASA engineer working at the local hardware store. He's using AI, remote train diagnostics, and complex ground loop geology, but he's still rolling up in a restored 1964 GMC van with a cartoon mascot on the side.
It's wild. The documentation stresses that they size every single system using highly precise manual J-load calculations. They outright ban the industry standard rules of thumb.
We should explain why that matters.
Right. Definitely, because it goes directly to the physical environment of Oklahoma. In the dead of summer, you are dealing with two distinct types of heat. You have the extreme 100-degree air temperature, which engineers call the sensible load.
Okay.
But you also have 80% humidity, which is the latent load. The moisture in the air holds massive amounts of heat energy.
So if a lazy contractor comes in and just uses a basic square footage rule of thumb to size an air conditioner, they almost always end up installing a system that is way too large.
Yes.
Which, to a layman like me, sounds like it would be a good thing. More power, faster cooling.
Right. It is entirely counterintuitive, but an oversized system is a disaster. It drops the ambient temperature so quickly that the thermostat shuts the system off before the coils have had enough time to pull the humidity out of the air.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, so the homeowner ends up sitting in a house that is 70 degrees but feels cold, clammy, and wet. Over time, that excess moisture feeds black mold inside the walls. Hartzell's strict engineering-based approach solves that by ensuring the system runs long enough to actually dehumidify.
And they take this engineering even further with geothermal technology. The sources show they are heavily pushing ground source heat pumps.
Geothermal is brilliant, but honestly misunderstood. Most people think of like geysers or volcanoes.
Yeah, exactly.
In residential HVAC, it simply uses the earth as a massive thermal battery. Just a few feet underground, the Earth maintains a very stable temperature of about 59 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit year-round.
So how do they actually harness that? Do they just dig a really deep hole?
Sort of. They bury hundreds of feet of high-density polyethylene pipe in the ground in what's called a ground loop and circulate water through it. In August, when the air outside is 108 degrees, a traditional AC struggles to push heat into that hot air.
Right.
But Hartzell's geothermal system dumps the heat from your house into that 59-degree water, which circulates underground and cools off instantly.
That is incredibly efficient.
It is. And then, in January, when the air is freezing, the system runs in reverse, extracting heat from that 59-degree Earth and compressing it to warm the house. It operates at 300 to 500% efficiency.
And the Playbook notes that Hartzell's is IGS-HPA accredited. For those unfamiliar, the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association is basically the gold standard for this technology.
It's a huge deal to have that.
Because they have that certification, they can navigate massive utility rebates for their customers. They're getting homeowners up to $2,000 per ton in cash back from local cooperatives like Seek Energy. A typical 3-ton residential install can get $6,000 handed back to the customer.
Which is an incredible sales tool that relies purely on technical competence.
But wait, because I found a detail in the web analytics that completely contrasts with the earthy analog geothermal system.
Oh, the AI.
Yes, they have deeply integrated artificial intelligence into the operation. There is Dave AI, which is a 24/7 voice and text assistant right on their website.
Yeah, and it's capable of answering complex HVAC questions.
Plus, they use a software called House Call Pro. The moment a technician finishes a job in the field, an AI agent automatically drafts a summary email and instantly fires off before and after photos directly to the customer's phone.
It's the perfect synthesis. I mean, the high-tech, engineering-based approach isn't a gimmick to sound smart. In a climate like Oklahoma's, where systems must handle both sensible and latent load, rules of thumb fail. It provides the structural integrity that allows the local trust to survive.
Right?
Think about it. If Dave was just a nice guy who sponsored the local Little League team, but he installed bad systems that left his neighbors damp and moldy, that community trust would evaporate in one summer. The engineering precision guarantees that the promises made on a handshake are actually kept.
Okay, but this brings up the most glaring vulnerability in this entire decentralized empire.
What's that?
If everything, the growth, the reputation, the AI integrations, rests on this delicate balance of deep community trust and high-level engineering, how do they prevent one bad hire from burning down 15 years of goodwill?
That is the risk.
They currently hold a 4.8-star Google rating across 271 reviews, and they just won the Business Rate 2026 award for the #1 AC contractor in Kingfisher. One guy with a bad attitude and a blowtorch could ruin that.
Protecting that reputation requires a filter that is just as rigorous as their load calculations. And you see the first layer of that filter in how they structure compensation.
Right, looking at the HR manuals, the technicians are paid strictly based on job completion and quality, not by the hour.
That is a highly intentional structural choice. It actively removes the financial incentive for a technician to run up the clock or to upsell unnecessary parts just to inflate a ticket.
That makes a lot of sense.
The technician's financial motivation is perfectly aligned with what the customer actually wants. Solve the problem correctly the very first time so the tech can move on to the next paying job.
And the back-end operations are incredibly robust. They handle all their HR policies through something called Insperity.
Right. Insperity is what's known as a PEO, a professional employer organization. Basically, it means this small local HVAC shop has outsourced its human resources to a massive corporate entity.
So they get better benefits.
Exactly. It allows a blue-collar worker in a rural town to get the kind of Fortune 500 level health benefits and 401k matches that you usually only get at a massive corporation.
The HR manuals show they manage this with extreme granularity. I mean, there's a rule written down called the Timothy Rusher exception, specifically dealing with vacation day carryovers.
It proves they manage the paperwork with the exact same obsessiveness as a commercial install.
But the actual vetting process for a new tech is where I want to push back. I read the scoring matrix they use for candidates, and frankly, it baffled me.
How so?
Well, they require a ride-along day, and they score candidates out of a total of 100 points. Community involvement and family stability make up a massive 35 points of that score.
Right.
Technical skills. A measly 10 points. Dave's ultimate reference check question to past employers and community members is, would you let him in your grandmother's house alone?
That's a great question.
It's a great sentiment.
Yeah.
But if technical skills are scored so low on their matrix compared to community ties, aren't they risking terrible HVAC installs just to hire the nice guy who shows up to the Mason's pancake breakfast?
Yeah.
I don't care how nice he is. I want the technical master wiring my high-voltage heat pump.
This raises an important question, but it requires us to radically reframe our assumptions about what is actually trainable in a human being.
Okay, I'm listening.
Let's look at the mechanics. How to braze a refrigerant line, how to wire a high-voltage contactor, how to read a multimeter. Those are concrete processes. They can be taught. Hartzell actively mentors at local Votechs, and the Playbook explicitly requires every new satellite operator to have a helper for their installs. The technical deficit is highly solvable.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Character, honesty under pressure. The emotional intelligence required to explain a complex $10,000 repair to a 70-year-old widow without making her feel stupid or taken advantage of, that cannot be installed in a classroom.
Wow. Yeah, you can't teach that.
Exactly. If you hire a master technician who lacks community roots and interpersonal integrity, you just have a highly skilled employee who might alienate your customers and damage your brand. But if you hire a trusted community leader who is willing to learn a trade, you have a future business owner.
The technical deficit is temporary, the character asset is permanent.
Precisely. A master technician without community roots is just an employee.
That is a complete inversion of how modern corporate America operates. I mean, a normal company uses software to scan resumes for keywords, degrees, and technical certifications, and then just crosses their fingers hoping the person isn't a jerk.
And it backfires all the time.
Hartzell is doing the exact opposite. He scans the community for trust and resilience and then uses rigorous training and AI-backed oversight to ensure the technical standard is met.
And that is precisely why the satellite operator model is successfully scaling. It acknowledges that, at the end of the day, human nature and local relationships are the ultimate drivers of business.
So bringing this all directly back to you, listening right now, whether you are building a team from scratch, evaluating a business to invest in, or just trying to navigate your own career in a world of constant information overload, there is a profound takeaway here.
There really is.
We so often overlook the immense value of someone's life experiences, a person's specific generational formation, whether that's a 70s-style upbringing where they learn to navigate chaos without a safety net, or something else entirely that is a hidden asset.
Right. When you look at the people around you, maybe your colleagues or even your kids, you have to realize that the ability to manage ambiguity isn't a soft skill. It's a foundational operational advantage.
Exactly. We spend millions of dollars trying to engineer perfect, frictionless systems to protect us from human error. But relying on the lived resilience of the human beings actually running those systems is often infinitely more effective.
Absolutely.
We have been conditioned for the last 20 years to think that the future of business belongs entirely to Silicon Valley, to faceless apps built by disruptors whose entire goal is to remove friction by removing human interaction.
Yeah, that's the narrative.
But this deep dive leaves us with something really important to mull over. What if the ultimate undisruptible competitive moat of the 21st century isn't a piece of code at all?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
What if it is hyper-localized, analog trust? Think about the guy who coaches your kid's soccer team, or the woman you see at the grocery store every week.
Yeah.
Quietly wielding automated AI and engineering-grade precision behind the scenes. You can disrupt a lot of things, but you cannot code a replacement for a handshake that actually means something.